In recent years, military authorities in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have stated that they no longer want their security priorities to be driven from outside their borders. The central question now is not whether they change their diplomatic language, but whether the Alliance of Sahel States has produced measurable change on the ground. These three states, all in the Central Sahel, have presented themselves as breaking with a security model built around external military operations, foreign funding, and international missions. This episode examines how Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger moved from being widely discussed as crisis zone to creating the Alliance of Sahel States in 2023 under the Liptako Gourma Charter, and later announcing the Confederation of the Alliance of Sahel States in 2024. First of all, we look at the moments when they drew a clear line with ECOWAS and longtime security partners by declaring on 28 January 2024 their intention to withdraw from the regional bloc. And then we step back to examine what they were leaving behind. Years of foreign operations, such as France's Operation Barkhane and European task forces, United Nations peacekeeping in Mali, and a stabilization approach that did not prevent the spread of armed groups across the Sahel. From there, we assess popular reactions inside these countries, the attempt to design new regional security mechanisms, and the economic and diplomatic pressure that followed. In this episode, we are going to look at how the Alliance of Sahel States was formed, how its new path has been implemented under pressure, and why its trajectory matters for wider debates about sovereignty in Africa. In September 2023, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger signed the Liptako Gourma Charter in Bamako, creating the Alliance of Sahel States as a mutual defense pact. The move signaled that the three military-led governments no longer trusted existing regional and external arrangements to guarantee their security and sovereignty. The announcement drew reactions across African capitals and among Western partners, raising the practical question of how far these states were prepared to go in redefining their security posture. For years, they had operated under security setups shaped through ECOWAS, the African Union, and partnerships with states such as France and European Union members. By launching the Alliance of Sahel States, they publicly described the previous model as unsatisfactory. The decision came after a prolonged period in which armed groups expanded their areas of operation, rural zones lost effective state presence, and international missions struggled to reverse these trends. Populations in these three countries saw successive external deployments, including French and European forces and the UN missions in Mali, while attacks and displacements continue to rise. By framing the alliance as a step towards collective self-reliance, the three governments sent a message that they intended to prioritize regional mechanisms over external military leaderships. Now, to understand how far the Alliance of Sahel States has progressed, it is necessary, very necessary, to first understand the configurations they were moving away from and why that configuration was widely seen as failing to deliver security. For more than a decade, security in the Sahel was heavily shaped by foreign military governments and international missions. France launched Operation Several in Mali in 2013, followed by Operation Barkhane across several Sahel states, while European partners contributed through initiatives such as Task Force Takuba. The United Nations Multi-Dimensional Integration Stabilization Missions in Mali, which is MINUSMA, was deployed from 2013 until its mandated withdrawal was completed at the end of 2023. Large sums were committed to security and development, but violence linked to jihadists and other armed groups expanded into Burkina Faso and Niger and continued within Mali. Official documents from partner governments and multilateral organizations often highlighted cooperation and partial gains. However, research and reporting from the region documented continued attacks, displacement, and shrinking state control in many rural areas. Analysts noted a growing gap between the language of civilization and the security conditions experienced by communities in central and northern Mali, northern and eastern Burkina Faso, and parts of western Niger. This environment created political space for current military authorities in the three countries to argue that the existing model has reached its limits. They presented the removal or reconfiguration of foreign military presences, the revision of defense agreements, and a stronger emphasis on national and regional forces as concrete expressions of sovereignty. When these governments ordered the departure of French forces from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger at different points between 2022 and 2023, and later backed the end of MINUSMA in Mali, critics at home and abroad warned of potential security vacuums. At the same time, segments of the public in Bamako, Ouagadougou, and Niamey viewed these steps as overdue corrections to a system they associated with ongoing instability. Public demonstrations in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger over the past several years have frequently featured national flags, slogans emphasizing sovereignty and support for the military authorities' decisions to revise or end certain security partnerships, while some external commentators described these changes as heightening uncertainty. Many participants in rallies presented them as efforts to control or regain control over national decisions. References to earlier Pan-African and anti-colonial figures, including Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, have appeared in public discourse and analysis when discussing recent political changes. For some observers and activists, the Alliance of Sahel States is interpreted as part of a broader trend in which governments seek to renegotiate their position in regional and global security arrangements. Among diaspora communities and Pan-African networks, the decision taken by Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have generated debate about the balance between external assistance and national control. While narratives differ, the moves by the three countries have clearly resonated beyond their borders. Popular mobilization and symbolic gestures, however, do not in themselves resolve complex security and governance challenges. As public attention shifted from announcements to implementation, the focus turned to whether the alliance could produce different outcomes from those seen under the previous model. The Alliance of Sahel States was established through the Liptako Gourma Charter on 16 September 2023 as a mutual defense agreement between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The charter commits that the three countries are to assist one another in the event of armed rebellion or external aggression and sets out principles for security and political cooperation. In July 2024, the three states announced the creation of the Confederation of the Alliance of Sahel States, signaling an intent to deepen integration. The idea of Africans protecting African territory is supported in official communications and speeches by the authorities in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, which emphasize, to quote, national and regional ownership of security decisions. For communities in zones that have experienced repeated attacks, the prospect of improved coordination holds symbolic and practical importance, although outcomes remain uneven. At the same time, analysts highlight significant constraints facing the alliance, which is extensive territory, limited state resources, and extended insurgent networks. The withdrawal or reduction of foreign military support has required that the three governments are to rapidly adjust logistics, equipment supply, and training systems. Despite these challenges, the authorities argue that building capacity under their own direction is preferable to continuing a model that did not stop the expansion of violence. As security arrangements evolve, another dimension has come into sharper focus: the economic and diplomatic consequences of the alliance decisions. The political shifts in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, along with the creation of Alliance of Sahel States and the announcement of their withdrawal from ECOWAS on 28 January 2024, have been accompanied by periods of sanctions and other forms of pressure from regional and international actors. ECOWAS and the West African Economic and Monetary Union imposed restrictions on the three countries at different stages. Following military takeovers, including financial sanctions and border measures, authorities in the three alliance states have publicly framed their stance as a defense of sovereignty and have called for alternative forms of cooperation and support, including stronger African links. Now, analysts and civil society actors, however, have raised questions about the distribution of costs, noting that restrictions have tended to fall heavily on populations facing high levels of poverty and insecurity. The tension between asserting greater autonomy and managing economic interdependence remains a central issue. Under these conditions, the Alliance of Sahel States has sought to reduce exposure to certain external pressures while exploring new partnerships that could offset financial and diplomatic losses. As relations with some traditional partners have deteriorated, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have intensified engagement with other states and actors. Mali's authorities invited Russian private military contractors, commonly referred to as the Wagner Group, and later reported cooperation with Russian security actors after France confirmed the end of Operation Barkhane in Mali. Burkina Faso and Niger have also signaled interest in diversifying their security and economic partnerships, including contacts with Russia and other non-Western partners. We are now going to look at how the Alliance of Sahel States has approached external relationships. Policy papers and official statements indicate an orientation towards states in the global south, such as Russia and China, and towards African partners open to alternative security and economic arrangements. The aim presented by alliance members is to broaden their networks of cooperation and avoid dependence on a single external actor. The Sahel's region's strategic significance is frequently noted in analysis. It hosts important mineral resources, sits between North and coastal West Africa, and is central to debates on migration, security, and energy routes. Now, these give the three states some bargaining power in discussions with new and existing partners. Observers caution, however, that shifting partners does not automatically resolve structural vulnerabilities. Commentaries warn that without transparent agreements and careful management, the alliance could replace one pattern of asymmetric relationships with another. As these new alignments take shape, the key question is whether they enable greater policy autonomy and improved conditions on the ground, or primarily reconfigure external influence. By early 2026, several years after the creation of the Alliance of Sahel States in 2023 and its evolution towards a confederation in 2024, available data and analysis show a mixed picture. Aimed groups linked to organizations such as Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wa Muslimin, an affiliate of Islamic State group, remain active across parts of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And the wider Sahel continues to experience high levels of displacement and humanitarian need. On a continental level, the decisions taken by Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have sparked wider discussions about regional integration, the role of ECOWAS, and the balance between external security assistance and national ownership. Some governments and commentators view the alliance as a test case for more assertive positions, while others emphasize the risk of fragmentation in regional structures. Across all these dimensions, citizens living in conflicts are those coping with economic strains remain central to any long-term evaluation. Their experiences of security, access to services, and representations will ultimately shape how the alliance is judged within the region. The outcome of this experiment in security-led integration will carry implications not only for 3 member states, but also for debates on sovereignty and cooperation across Africa. This is Frontline Africa. If this kind of unfiltered Africa First analysis resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. My name is P. Solomon, and I'll see you in the next one.